The morning sunlight streamed through the 12-foot windows of the Crest estate, casting a golden glow across the cream and marble interiors. The scent of jasmine still lingered from the imported floral arrangements, a luxury she didn't even order but paid for anyway. Every detail of the home had been hand-selected by Sebastian, her husband, or rather her soon-to-be past. Alina stood in front of the mirror, brushing her hair like muscle memory, not because she wanted to look good for him, but because routine was the last thing tethering her to sanity. Her reflection stared back with that same pristine perfection she was known for: smooth skin, poised eyes, lips that rarely trembled. A billion-dollar woman groomed for showrooms and charity galas, but hollowed out in all the places that mattered. It was the 5th anniversary of their marriage, and she'd just received the confirmation. The final proof. A manila envelope sat unopened on her vanity. Inside were glossy photographs, Sebastian, her husband, caught in crystal-clear infidelity with none other than Serena Lee, her former best friend, her bridesmaid, her maid of honor. The irony was delicious. Alina didn't cry. She smiled, slowly, methodically, a blade-sharp smile honed by years of betrayal hidden behind private jets and gala gowns. Because today, she didn't fall apart. Today, Alina Crest began again. What Sebastian didn't know was that the money he built his company with was never really his. It was hers. Inherited from her father's tech empire before he died in a car crash, no one could quite explain. The shares had been quietly merged, tied up in prenups and estate trusts, buried under Sebastian's name on the surface, but still traceable, if you knew where to look. And Alina had started looking months ago. She had hired forensic accountants, digital tracers, even a ghost in cybersecurity named Ash. Together, they had untangled the web Sebastian tried to spin. He thought he married a submissive heiress. He hadn't realized she was a dormant storm. The legal reversal was complete. She now owned 63% of Crest Industries. He didn't know it yet, but he would. Today, she found him in the garden, shirtless, charming, slicing fresh strawberries onto Greek yogurt like a man who still believed in control. "Morning," he said, smiling. That boyish grin that once made her knees weak, now it made her sick. Alina poured herself coffee, sat across from him, and simply stared. "What?" Sebastian asked, laughing. "I want a divorce," she said, voice calm as velvet. The spoon clattered from his hand. "You're not serious." "I am, and you should know." She leaned forward slightly, every inch of her composed as she delivered the kill shot. "The shares are mine now. All of them. The house, the planes, the board. You'll be removed by noon." She slid a folder across the table. Legal, ironclad, irreversible. Sebastian stared, eyes wide, panic setting in like rot under his perfect smile. "You don't know what you're doing," he hissed. Alina stood slowly, her silk robe catching the sunlight like armor. "On the contrary," she said, "I'm finally waking up." By midday, Serena Lee received a call from her agent. The luxury endorsement deal she boasted about, gone. Her modeling contract, terminated. Every connection she'd leveraged through Alina, erased. Because Alina had waited, she had collected, she had prepared. And now she was purging. Serena's screams through the phone, caught on a recorded line, were music. Sebastian's threats? Powerless. Because Alina wasn't just leaving. She was taking everything they thought they stole and weaponizing it against them. And this was just the beginning. Alina remembered the birthday dinner 2 years ago, not because it was extravagant, but because it was the day she realized love could rot while still smiling at you across the table. The dining room had been drenched in candlelight. The long mahogany table was set with vintage silverware, baccarat crystal, and bone-white china that had never once been used before. Sebastian had arranged a private chef. There was a string quartet, guests she didn't know, mostly his colleagues, drinking her wine and laughing too loudly. But not once. Not once did he make eye contact with her. Not when she walked in wearing the red Valentino dress she knew he liked. Not when she toasted to another year of their beautiful partnership. Not even when she opened the gift box he placed before her. Diamond earrings. Expensive, exquisite, and soulless. "You don't even know I'm allergic to white gold," she said softly under her breath. Sebastian didn't look up from his phone. "I'll exchange them. Just like that. Cold, functional, transactional." Later that night, when the guests left and the staff cleared the last of the rows, she confronted him in their bedroom. "I'm not a mannequin," she said. "You don't get to decorate me to match your press photos." Sebastian had smiled then. Not the charming one, the other one. The one she learned meant you're becoming inconvenient. You were much easier before you started thinking for yourself. Her breath caught. Before she started thinking for herself, that night she slept in the guest room, and the next morning he left for a conference in Milan. He didn't come back for a week, and when he did, she smelled Chanel No. 5 on his coat. It wasn't hers. Alina snapped back to the present, her fingers curled tightly around the handle of her espresso cup. The porcelain had cracked. She hadn't realized she'd gripped it so hard. The memory didn't hurt anymore. It fueled her. She wasn't the woman in the red dress begging for eye contact. She wasn't the broken birthday girl in the guest room. She was Alina Crest. And now, they would see what happened when the woman they underestimated came back. Not to heal, but to conquer. The grandiose ballrooms and private boardrooms of Crest Industries were where the world knew Sebastian as a genius businessman. To the public, he was a self-made millionaire, successful, powerful, untouchable. But Alina knew the truth. She knew the man behind the mask, the man who thought he could control her, cheat on her, and still be beloved by the masses. And now? Now it was her turn to reshape the narrative. Alina adjusted the pristine white gloves of her custom-made Chanel suit as she prepared for her first public move in this battle of silent wars. Today wasn't just any day. It was a corporate announcement, the kind of thing that Sebastian had spent years planning, a press release unveiling the next phase of his company's expansion into European markets, a celebration of success, a marker of his victory. The reality? It would be the day everything he'd built would begin to crumble. As she walked across the marble floors of the Crest Industries headquarters in Manhattan, Alina's heels clicked with precision. Every step was deliberate, every move calculated. The lobby was as pristine as ever, the same polished marble floors, the same grand chandelier hanging above her head, casting its lights like eyes watching her every move. And there they were, the business elite of New York City, congregating, smiling, discussing the latest mergers and acquisitions. None of them had the faintest idea of what was coming. In the midst of them all, she spotted him. Sebastian stood by the glass windows overlooking the skyline, holding a glass of scotch in one hand, and his phone in the other. He was discussing business with a group of his closest investors, the ones who still thought they controlled everything. His eyes narrowed as he saw Alina approaching. A small smirk curled his lips. He thought he'd won. He always thought he won. Alina couldn't help but smile back, but this time it wasn't the kind of smile that bent to his will. It was the smile of a woman who was about to take back everything she deserved. The moment the microphones were set up in the high-rise conference room, all eyes turned to her. The camera flashes were blinding as Alina took her seat at the head of the table, flanked by Sebastian's closest colleagues. They didn't know she had already been briefed on every detail of the press release they were about to unveil. She had made sure of it. The board, the media outlets, they would never suspect her involvement in this latest announcement. Sebastian stepped up beside her, adjusting his suit jacket as he leaned into the podium. His face was all business, smooth, calm, collected. But Alina could see the glint of uncertainty in his eyes, even if no one else could. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today," he began, his voice smooth and controlled, as always. "We are here to announce an exciting new phase of Crest Industries, a step forward into the future." He smiled, and Alina had to suppress a bitter laugh. The future? He had no idea what the future held. It was her turn now. She picked up the mic, and all eyes shifted to her, just as planned. She had a quiet confidence about her, something that made the room fall silent before she even spoke. "Thank you, Sebastian. As we look to the future, it is important to understand where that future comes from," Alina said, her voice a perfect balance of calm and authority. "I have spent the last few weeks reviewing our company's core values and vision, and while I believe in the growth we've made over the years, I also know that there is one thing that is crucial to moving forward: change." The room held its breath. Sebastian's brow furrowed, but Alina continued. "That's why, effective immediately, I'm assuming control of 51% of Crest Industries." She paused, letting the weight of the statement settle in the room like thunder. A murmur spread across the table. Investors looked at each other with wide eyes. Sebastian's face lost all color. I will be restructuring the board and reallocating resources, Alina continued, her words measured and sharp. Crest Industries will now pivot its focus. I'm confident we will succeed, but, as with any successful venture, it's important to have the right people leading it. People who understand what the company truly needs. The room was dead silent. Alina glanced over at Sebastian, who had gone pale, his grip tightening around the edge of the podium. You can't do this, he spat, his voice cracking just slightly. I built this company. Alina met his gaze, her eyes cold, yet with a strange, almost painful softness. No, Sebastian, I built it. You just didn't know it yet. She turned to the audience. I'll be taking questions from the press now. And as she spoke, she watched him crumble in front of everyone he had worked so hard to manipulate and control. The eyes that had once admired him turned on him in judgment. The spotlight was hers now. Later that evening, Alina sat alone in her penthouse, watching the late-night news broadcast. The headlines flashed across the screen. Crest Industries under new leadership. Alina Crest takes control. Sebastian Crest ousted from his own company. She could hear the distant echoes of Sebastian's frantic calls from earlier, his voicemail messages flooding in one after another. But Alina had long stopped listening to his pleas. The only thing that mattered now was her next move. She wasn't just tearing down his empire, she was building hers. Alina knew that her moment had arrived. As she walked through the marble halls of Crest Industries, the weight of the world seemed to hang on her shoulders. She had spent years being the perfect wife, the perfect partner, the perfect supporting figure. But today, the world would see who she truly was. A woman who had been underestimated for far too long. The cameras were already rolling, the journalists were poised and ready, and the cold, efficient air of corporate power pressed in around her. Alina took a deep breath, her gloved fingers brushing the smooth edges of the polished table as she stepped into the high-rise boardroom. She had become familiar with this room, both from the years she spent as a silent observer of Sebastian's business dealings and from the quiet moments of reflection. This was where everything would change. Sebastian, the once untouchable figure at the helm of Crest Industries, stood at the front, awaiting the moment when he could present his grand announcement. Alina could see the pride in his eyes, the confidence that he had always exuded, but now there was a nervous energy in the air, an unspoken understanding that something was about to shift. When the press release was officially announced, Alina couldn't help but notice the arrogance that lingered in Sebastian's voice. He had always been the one in control. He spoke with authority, as though his position in the company was beyond question. But there was a hint of discomfort behind his smile, a subtle twitch of uncertainty in his posture that only Alina could notice. She could feel his eyes on her as she took her place behind the podium. He knew exactly what was coming. His shock would be undeniable when the time came, but for now, he would play along, until she dropped the bombshell. Alina couldn't help but feel a rush of exhilaration as the microphone was handed to her. She had been waiting for this moment for so long, the culmination of years of pain, loss, and betrayal. But today, she would flip the script. Thank you, Sebastian, she said smoothly, her voice carrying effortlessly through the room, cool and composed. As we look to the future, I think we can all agree that change is necessary, but with change comes a new vision, one that is aligned with growth, opportunity, and progress. The investors and journalists leaned forward, hanging on her every word. She could feel the shift in the room as they began to realize that this was no ordinary speech. Alina was taking control, and they could feel it. Today, she continued, I am announcing that I will be assuming leadership of Crest Industries, effective immediately. I will be taking over 51% of the company and overseeing all operations moving forward. The room fell deathly silent. It was as if time itself had come to a standstill. Alina turned her gaze to Sebastian, watching as his face drained of color. His jaw clenched, his eyes flickered with disbelief, then anger. You can't do this, he hissed under his breath, too soft for anyone else to hear, but loud enough for Alina to savor. She gave him a cool, unreadable smile. I already have. In the hours that followed, Alina could practically hear the sound of Sebastian's empire crumbling. His closest allies and investors, the ones who had always praised him for his ability to stay one step ahead, were now looking at him with doubt and skepticism. She had no doubt that he would retaliate. Sebastian was proud. He was vindictive, But Alina knew exactly how to handle him. She wouldn't let his rage, or his calculated attempts to reclaim control, derail her plan. He had betrayed her, and now he would watch as she took everything from him. Alina's phone buzzed incessantly, each message from Sebastian a desperate plea to meet, to talk. His voice over the phone was frantic, his anger rising with each passing minute. But Alina didn't answer. She didn't need to. She'd already won. Alina sat in her penthouse suite later that evening, staring out over the city skyline. She knew Sebastian's pride wouldn't allow him to back down easily. He would fight to keep what was rightfully hers. But Alina had learned to be patient. She had learned how to navigate the complex chessboard of power. The next phase of her plan would be critical, and Alina wasn't about to let emotions or impulsive decisions cloud her judgment. Just then, her phone rang and she saw Sebastian's name flash across the screen. She swiped to answer, her heart steady, her voice cold. "Alina," he began, his voice dripping with barely contained fury, "you've made a terrible mistake. You'll regret this. I'll fight you for it." Alina's lips twitched, the faintest hint of amusement in her eyes. "You always were too confident in your position, Sebastian. You never truly thought I could take what's mine, did you?" He was silent for a long moment, the tension thick in the air. "You think you can take everything from me?" he spat. "You'll see. You're nothing without me. You always were." The hurt in his words was unmistakable. He was angry, yes, but there was something deeper, something more personal in his voice. A realization that she was no longer his trophy, his possession. "I already have," Alina replied softly. "And you'll watch me take everything you worked for. It's only just beginning." The fallout from the press conference was swift. The investors who had once followed Sebastian loyally began to reach out to Alina. She was more than just a figurehead, she was the future of Crest Industries. Her vision for the company was one of expansion, growth, and modernization, exactly what they'd been waiting for. Sebastian's grip on the company was slipping. His power waned as he realized the depth of Alina's influence and the loyalty she had quietly fostered among the key players in their corporate world. For the first time, Alina saw Sebastian in a different light. He wasn't the confident man he'd once been. Now, he was a broken, desperate figure, trying to claw his way back to something he no longer had control over. But Alina wasn't interested in sympathy or revenge. She was interested in victory, and with each passing moment, she was one step closer to ensuring that Sebastian, and everything he had taken from her, would belong to her again. Alina stepped into the sleek, modern boardroom of Crest Industries the following week, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. The sleek glass walls reflected her composed, unbothered expression as she surveyed the long table ahead. This wasn't her first time in this space, but this time, she was in control. She was no longer the quiet wife standing beside her husband, making polite conversation. No, this time, she was the woman at the helm of a company she had quietly built the foundation for, one step at a time. She could feel the weight of the room as the board members took their seats. The tension in the air was palpable. They were all waiting to see how the power dynamic would shift now that Alina had solidified her position. Some were wary of her, others were intrigued, but none were prepared for the chaos that was about to unfold. Sebastian was not in the room yet, though his presence loomed over everything. His absence was an acknowledgement that he was still unwilling to fully accept that the company, and his legacy, had slipped from his grasp. He had underestimated Alina for too long, but today, the world would see who truly had the power. Alina didn't need to speak a word as she walked to the head of the table and took her seat. There was a stillness in the air, the kind that always precedes a storm. She placed her hands lightly on the table, the sound of her fingers tapping faintly in the otherwise silent room. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, and she could feel their eyes on her, waiting, testing, calculating. The meeting began as every other board meeting had. The usual formalities were exchanged, updates on revenue, upcoming projects, and potential investments. Alina listened intently, her mind working in tandem with the business at hand, but the moment was building to something bigger. Her plan was unfolding, deliberately, methodically. A knock on the door interrupted the usual buzz of conversation. The door creaked open, and in walked Sebastian, his presence commanding yet strained. His sharp suit, once an emblem of his power, now felt like a costume that no longer fit. The moment he stepped into the room, Alina could feel the shift. The tension thickened as all eyes turned to him. He was here to take back control, but Alina was no longer the weak woman he had once dismissed. Sebastian took his seat at the opposite end of the table, a forced smile on his lips. He had clearly rehearsed his words, but the hesitancy in his eyes betrayed him. "Thank you, everyone, for gathering today. I'd like to begin by discussing the upcoming merger with Wilkins International," he started, his voice cutting through the silence, his tone as authoritative as ever. But Alina wasn't listening to him. She was watching him carefully, analyzing his every movement, every word. She had a plan, one that would expose his weaknesses, unmask his insecurities, and, in the process, solidify her own position once and for all. As the meeting went on, Alina waited for the perfect moment, and when it came, she seized it. With a subtle gesture, Alina leaned forward and cleared her throat, her voice ringing out clear and sharp in the room. The murmurs fell into an abrupt silence. "Actually, Sebastian, I have a different approach," she said coolly, her eyes locked onto his. Her words sliced through the tension in the room like a razor-sharp blade. Sebastian's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and irritation. "What do you mean?" he asked, though there was a slight tremor in his voice, a sound that hadn't been there before. The cracks were starting to show. "I mean," Alina continued, "I don't think we should pursue the merger with Wilkins International at all." The room was utterly still. Every pair of eyes was on Alina, the sudden change in direction catching them all off guard. The murmurs had stopped entirely. "What?" Sebastian barked, unable to mask his rising panic. "We've already started negotiations. It's too late to back out now." Alina tilted her head slightly, the faintest of smiles curling at the corners of her lips. "No, it's not," she said. "In fact, I've already instructed our legal team to halt all discussions with Wilkins. The terms were never in our favor. They were designed to benefit them, not us. And that, my dear husband, is where I will show you the difference between your approach and mine." She could see the rage bubbling beneath the surface of Sebastian's carefully crafted mask. His fists clenched, his jaw tightened, but there was nothing he could do in this moment. He had lost the upper hand. "Do you really think you can just undo years of work?" Sebastian sneered, though it lacked its usual confidence. "You think you can make all the decisions now that I've what?" Alina interjected, her voice calm but laced with a cutting edge. "Now that I've taken control of my company?" She stared him down. "It's no longer your company, Sebastian. It never was." Alina's words were like a shot across the bow. His eyes darkened with fury, and for a moment, it seemed like the entire room was holding its breath. Sebastian, for all his bravado, was sinking. Every word she spoke peeled away his facade. The board members shifted in their seats, clearly uncomfortable, but not willing to intervene. They could see the writing on the wall. The silence in the room stretched on, and Alina let the weight of her words hang in the air before continuing. "I've already called a meeting with some of our key partners. They're fully on board with the changes I'm implementing. This merger isn't happening, and neither is your control." She turned her gaze to the others in the room, their uncertainty written across their faces. "I trust you all understand where we stand. Sebastian is no longer in charge. I am." Sebastian's face had turned a shade of red that only came with utter humiliation. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. The truth had finally hit him like a wrecking ball. "You're making a grave mistake, Alina," he muttered, his voice hoarse. "I don't think so," she replied coolly, "but I'm willing to let you prove me wrong." The silence in the room was deafening. The board members exchanged wary glances, and a few even nodded slightly, their loyalty shifting. They knew which side their bread was buttered on now. Sebastian stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This isn't over," he said, his voice a low growl. But it was clear to everyone that he wasn't in control anymore. His legacy was slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. As he stormed out of the room, Alina watched him go, feeling an unexpected rush of satisfaction. The war had only just begun. But today she had won the first battle. Later that evening, as Alina sat in her penthouse office overlooking the city, she allowed herself a rare moment of reflection. The feeling of having taken back control, of watching Sebastian squirm, was both satisfying and liberating. It was a taste of what was to come. She'd been born into wealth, raised with everything she could ever want, but nothing had ever felt as sweet as this moment, This was hers, the company, the power, the freedom. Alina was no longer the woman she had been, the one who had stood silently behind her husband. She was the woman who would tear down everything Sebastian had built and rebuild it in her image. As she turned back to the task at hand, a small smile played on her lips. This was only the beginning. The days following the boardroom confrontation were a whirlwind of activity. Alina's position was solidifying, and the power she had quietly maneuvered into was now hers to command. With Sebastian out of the picture for the moment, she had to act quickly, efficiently. The first step was finding allies, those who would help her not just survive, but thrive in this volatile world of high-stakes corporate warfare. Alina knew that true power didn't just come from owning the boardroom. It came from the alliances you forged. And for that, she needed to secure partnerships with those who shared her vision, or, at the very least, had something to gain from it. She understood that not all alliances had to be built on trust. Sometimes, they were simply a matter of mutual benefit. Her first target was Richard Hawke, a billionaire investor with a reputation for ruthlessness. His name was whispered in the corridors of corporate power as a man who never lost. And Alina, despite her calm exterior, had studied him closely. She knew what he wanted, what he needed. Richard's fortune was based on tech innovations, and Alina had just the right business proposition that could align with his next move. Crest Industries' recent acquisition of a small, underutilized tech firm could be the key to unlocking the next phase of their growth, if done right. And Richard was just the partner to make it happen. She had requested a meeting with him in the elegant lobby of the Hawke Group headquarters. The space was modern, clean, and oozed wealth in a way that made Alina feel right at home. She was calm, poised, and dressed in a crisp white blazer that hinted at her new leadership role. There would be no room for doubt. She was here to make deals, not to play games. As she was escorted into the private conference room, she noted the slight tension in the air, the sharp gaze of the assistant who led her in, the glances exchanged among the staff. Richard Hawke wasn't known for entertaining anyone lightly, but Alina wasn't just anyone. "Ms. Wexford," Richard greeted her with a tight smile. His dark hair and sharp features exuded an air of authority. "I must admit, I didn't expect to see you here today. Last I heard, you were still embroiled in your husband's mess." Alina held his gaze unflinchingly, her voice steady and filled with quiet power. "I'm here because I want to offer you something that benefits both of us. Your expertise, my resources. Together, we can reshape the future." Richard's interest piqued, and she could see the shift in his demeanor. He was intrigued, but Alina knew she had to seal the deal before his curiosity turned to skepticism. The next few minutes were a blur of numbers, projections, and strategies. Alina laid out her vision clearly, outlining the opportunities that lay in combining the tech firm's assets with Hawke's influence and capital. She spoke of expansion, new markets, and the potential for exponential growth, all while maintaining the sleek, calculated professionalism she had honed over years of studying the corporate world. "You see," Alina continued, "what Sebastian and I created, what he built, was only ever a part of the picture. The future lies in adapting, in pivoting. We both know that tech is the way forward, and I have the resources to ensure that Crest Industries becomes a leader in that space." Richard leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing as he considered her words. Alina knew he wasn't a man who made decisions lightly, and the longer the silence stretched, the more her nerves tightened. But she wasn't about to back down. She was on the verge of something monumental. Finally, Richard spoke. "Your offer is interesting, Alina, but I've worked with enough people to know that what you're offering is as much about control as it is about money. What exactly do you want from me?" A smile tugged at the corners of her lips, as if the question was exactly what she had been waiting for. "I want your expertise and your backing," she said firmly. "And, in return, I'll offer you an exclusive partnership with Crest Industries. A deal that ensures your influence grows and your investments prosper. You will hold a seat at the table, Richard, a position of power in the very company that will reshape the future." Richard's eyes flickered with the first sign of genuine interest. "And why would I choose you over Sebastian? He's still the one with the company's name." Alina's eyes never wavered as she leaned in just slightly, emphasizing her point. "Because Sebastian is a man of the past. He's outdated. He doesn't have the vision, the determination to push boundaries, and he certainly doesn't have the heart to take risks. I do, Together, we can turn Crest into something greater. I can guarantee you that." The moment hung in the air, and she could see Richard weighing the risk. He was a businessman, and business was about recognizing opportunities. But it was more than that. He wanted power, he wanted dominance, and she could offer him that in spades. Finally, Richard extended his hand. "All right, Alina, you've got yourself a deal." Alina's grip was firm as they shook hands. The first official partnership had been sealed, but this was only the beginning. The alliances she was building were more than just strategic. They were the foundation of her vengeance, and with each move, she was slowly tightening the net around Sebastian. That evening, as Alina sat at her desk, the soft glow of the city skyline filtering through the windows of her office, she reflected on the power she had just gained. This was more than just business. This was personal. With every alliance, every deal, she was reclaiming her life, her future, and her place in a world that had once been out of her reach. But even as the satisfaction of her victory lingered, there was something else, a feeling of resolve, a quiet storm building inside her. She had no intention of stopping here. Her enemies had underestimated her, thought she was weak, easy to break, but in reality she was more dangerous now than ever before. A knock on her door broke her thoughts, and she looked up to find Jason standing there. His presence was always a reminder of the complexity of her new life. He had been there in the beginning, always watching from the shadows, offering quiet support. But she knew that his role in this story wasn't over. And just as quickly, she realized that her feelings for him were becoming harder to ignore. "Alina," Jason said with a faint smile, his eyes lingering on her as though he was studying her every move. "You've done it. Richard Hawke is on your side now." Alina's lips curled into a small smile, but there was an underlying wariness in her eyes. "This is just the beginning. We're only getting started." Jason's gaze softened as he stepped closer. "And I'll be here to make sure you finish it. You're not alone in this." Alina's heart skipped a beat at the sincerity in his voice. For a moment, she allowed herself to relax, to acknowledge the growing connection between them, but her mind quickly reminded her of her ultimate goal. Sebastian would fall, and the world would know that Alina Wexford was the woman who had taken everything he had built and made it hers. The days after securing Richard Hawke's partnership had been a whirlwind of meetings, contracts, and strategic planning. Alina felt herself slipping into a new role, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. She was no longer the woman scorned, she was a force in the corporate world, a woman who had carefully carved her path to power, and now she was beginning to weave a web, one that would ensnare not just her ex-husband, but the people who had helped him destroy her. But the most important thread she had to pull was the one that tied Sebastian's fortune together, the vast network of deals, secret alliances, and betrayals that made up the foundation of his empire. Alina knew that his success wasn't just built on ambition and business acumen. It was built on lies, hidden transactions, and underhanded deals. If she wanted to bring him down, she would have to uncover each one, piece by piece. She spent her nights going through the files she had gathered, documents from his business partners, old contracts, emails that had been tucked away in corners of the digital world. There was nothing too small to be left unexamined. Everything had to be scrutinized. Each betrayal she uncovered brought her closer to understanding how deep the deception ran, how much Sebastian had hidden from the world, from her. But there was something more. Alina was starting to realize that this wasn't just about taking him down for what he had done to her. It was about proving that she was better than him, that she was the one who had the strength to rise above, to build something that was hers and hers alone. Her phone buzzed on the desk in front of her, pulling her from her thoughts. She glanced at the screen, Jason's name. Her stomach fluttered, but she quickly pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't about him. It was about power. Alina. Jason's voice came through the phone, smooth and calm as always. "I've got something for you. You might want to take a look." "What is it?" Alina asked, her voice guarded. Jason paused before responding. "I've been digging into Sebastian's financials, just like you asked. I think I've found something interesting, something that could be the key to toppling everything he's built." Alina leaned forward, her interest piqued. "What are you talking about? Remember the tech venture he recently acquired? The one you thought was a bit too perfect?" Jason asked, his tone lowering. "It wasn't just a simple investment. It was a front for something much darker, something that's been funneled through a network of shell companies. I'm sending you the files now." Alina's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the email Jason had sent her. She scrolled through the documents quickly, her mind racing. Jason had been right. The acquisition wasn't as straightforward as it appeared. There were hidden layers to this deal, layers that led to a labyrinth of shell companies, each one interwoven with others in a way that created a near-impenetrable fortress of deception. But Alina wasn't just anyone. She had spent her entire life unraveling lies, and this one was no different. Over the next few days, Alina and Jason worked tirelessly to piece together the puzzle. They dug deeper into Sebastian's business dealings, pulling out every document, every scrap of information that could be used to expose him. It was a careful, methodical process, but Alina was determined. She could feel the walls closing in on Sebastian, and she knew the time was coming when his empire would crumble. One night, after hours of work, Alina leaned back in her chair and exhaled deeply. She was tired, but there was something invigorating about the pursuit. The web she had woven was becoming more complex, more intricate, and Sebastian, despite all his wealth and power, was right in the center of it, unknowingly caught in her trap. Jason entered the room, holding a glass of wine. He handed it to her without a word, his expression unreadable, but there was a glint in his eyes, something that made Alina pause. For the briefest moment, she wondered what it was about him that was so magnetic, so compelling. But she quickly pushed the thought away. She couldn't afford distractions, not now, not when she was so close. "Everything's in place," Jason said, settling into the chair across from her. "We've set the trap, Alina. All we need is for Sebastian to take the bait." She nodded, her fingers brushing the edge of the wineglass. "And when he does?" "When he does," Jason replied, his tone darker now. "We expose him for the fraud he is. We take control of everything, his company, his reputation, his future." Alina met his gaze, her mind already calculating the next step. "And then we make him watch as we rebuild everything he stole. Piece by piece." Jason's lips curved into a slow smile. Exactly. The words hung in the air, charged with an energy that made Alina's heart race. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about something bigger. About proving her worth, about taking control of her life in a way she never had before. She wasn't just fighting for power, she was fighting for herself. The moment they had been waiting for arrived sooner than expected. Alina's team had been monitoring Sebastian's every move, and it wasn't long before they caught a break. One of the shell companies, a small tech startup that had been quietly siphoning money from Sebastian's funds, was about to go public with an announcement that could trigger a massive shift in his empire. It was the perfect time to strike. Alina had her legal team draft a statement, a carefully worded document that would expose the illegal transactions behind the tech firm's rise. She had already arranged for the press to be briefed, ensuring that the news would spread like wildfire. The headlines would write themselves. That morning, as Alina prepared for the press conference, she felt a calmness settle over her. This was the moment she had been working for, the moment when Sebastian's carefully constructed world would begin to crumble. She glanced at the time, then at Jason, who was standing by her side, his expression unreadable but supportive. He had been with her from the beginning, through all the calculations, all the risks, and now they were about to see the fruits of their labor. The press conference room was filled with reporters, their cameras clicking and flashing as they awaited the announcement. Alina stood at the podium, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. But she wasn't afraid, she was ready. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice steady, commanding. "Today, I am here to reveal a truth that my ex-husband, Sebastian Wexford, has worked tirelessly to conceal. What you will hear today is not just a corporate scandal. It is the revelation of his corruption, his lies, and his manipulation. What he has built was never his to begin with. It was built on deception, and it is time the world knew the truth." Alina paused, letting the words hang in the air, letting the shock of the moment sink in. Then, with a smooth, almost cruel smile, she continued, "And this is only the beginning." The room erupted into chaos, flashes from the cameras blinding her as the reporters shouted questions, but Alina stood tall, confident in her victory. Sebastian would never see it coming. The days that followed the press conference were nothing short of chaos. News outlets picked up the story, and within hours, the scandal had exploded. Sebastian's carefully curated public image was shattered, and his company was left reeling from the blow. But for Alina, it was just the beginning. She watched from the sidelines as Sebastian scrambled to repair the damage, his once unshakable control slipping from his grasp. The public was turning on him, his business partners distancing themselves, and his once adoring fans were beginning to question everything. Alina knew that this was only a small taste of what was to come. There was still much more to be done, many more pieces to her plan. But with every step she could feel the grip on her old life, the one she had been forced to leave behind, loosening. Now, she was the one in control. And Sebastian? He was about to learn that no one could rise from betrayal the way she had. As the pressure of her escalating revenge mounts, Alina begins to encounter new, unexpected obstacles. It's not just Sebastian's business dealings and financial empire that she needs to dismantle. It's the emotional anchors that keep her tied to the past. Despite all her success and calculated moves, Alina feels an unshakable sense of loss. The betrayal of her ex-husband Sebastian had been her catalyst, but now, as the pieces of her plan fall into place, the haunting memories of their time together start to creep back into her thoughts. One night, alone in her penthouse office, Alina sits by the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the cityscape that sprawls below. The lights of the city twinkle like distant stars, but for her, the brightness only emphasizes the void that still lingers in her heart. Every success, every move she makes, every win, none of it fills the emptiness that has been there since her heart was shattered by the man she once loved. Her phone rings, pulling her from her thoughts. It's a number she's learned to dread over the years. Her mother. Alina hesitates for a moment before answering. Her relationship with her mother has always been fraught, cold, distant, and wrapped in layers of judgment and disappointment. Her mother had never approved of her relationship with Sebastian, and over the years the two women had drifted further and further apart. Alina, her mother's voice is as sharp as always. I've been hearing things. About you, about your actions. Is it true what they're saying? Are you really destroying your ex-husband's life just to take what he built? Alina's jaw tightens. There is a deep ache in her chest, not from her mother's disappointment, but from the memories of the judgment she had grown up with. Always needing to be perfect, always needing to prove her worth to a woman who had never truly cared. You don't understand, Alina says, her voice betraying a hint of emotion she rarely allows herself to show. I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this because I was betrayed, and it's the only way I can regain control of my life. Her mother doesn't respond immediately. Then, with a cruel edge to her voice, she speaks. Control? Is that what you think this is about? Or is it about punishing the people who wronged you? You've always been good at playing the victim, Alina, but when you've taken everything from him, then what will you have left? Alina feels the sting of those words, but she holds her ground. I'm not a victim anymore, Mother. I'm stronger than I've ever been. And if you can't see that, then maybe you've never known me at all. Her mother's silence on the other end of the phone is deafening, but before she can respond, Alina ends the call. The conversation has left her shaken, but it also stirs something deeper, something that has been bubbling beneath the surface for months. The need for validation from her mother had always been one of the deepest wounds in her life. It's the source of her drive, the reason she pushes herself relentlessly, because if she could prove to her mother that she was worth something, perhaps it would fill the void that Sebastian's betrayal had left behind. But as Alina sits in her penthouse, staring at her reflection in the dark glass, she realizes that no amount of revenge, no amount of success, will ever heal that wound. She has to learn how to heal herself before she destroys everyone around her, including herself. Meanwhile, Sebastian's empire begins to crack under the pressure of the scandal Alina has set in motion. As the legal battles intensify, Sebastian's supporters begin to fall away. His once loyal investors start to distance themselves, and his business dealings become more desperate. Every attempt to regain control ends in failure, and the media begins to paint him as a man who is not only incompetent, but deeply corrupt. But Sebastian is a survivor. He's always been able to adapt, to manipulate, to weasel his way out of the most difficult situations, and despite the storm swirling around him, he's doing everything he can to hold on. He begins to turn to his old allies, the ones who had been a part of his rise to power, the ones who knew the secrets he had hidden from the world. One such ally is his trusted lawyer, Daniel Hughes, a man who has worked for Sebastian for over a decade. Unknown to Alina, Daniel had played a key role in covering up Sebastian's illegal dealings. He had helped him set up the network of shell companies that had been used to launder money, and he had kept the most dangerous parts of Sebastian's empire from the public eye. But now, with the threat of exposure hanging over them, Daniel sees an opportunity to shift allegiances. It starts with a subtle approach. Daniel reaches out to Alina, pretending to offer his help in taking down Sebastian. He claims to be disillusioned with Sebastian's actions, says that he wants to see justice done. But Alina, ever the strategist, knows better. She listens carefully, watching for any sign of duplicity. And as the pieces fall into place, she realizes that Daniel is trying to use her own vendetta to his advantage. He's not just offering help, he's trying to use her to gain leverage in a bigger game. Alina doesn't trust him, but she knows she can use his connections. She agrees to play along, carefully managing her interactions with him. The game has become more complex, but Alina is prepared to handle the web of deceit Sebastian and his allies are trying to weave. In the midst of her machinations, Alina begins to turn her focus to something that had been lingering in the back of her mind since the beginning, her growing attraction to Jason. Jason had always been more than just a partner in her scheme. His intelligence, his ruthlessness, his drive. There was something magnetic about him that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't love, not yet. But the tension between them was undeniable. Late one night, after hours of poring over documents and strategizing her next move, Alina finds herself alone with Jason in the office. The city lights shine through the windows, casting long shadows across the room. Jason stands across from her, his usual calm demeanor softening just a bit. The air between them feels charged, as though the weight of their shared mission has drawn them closer. "Alina," Jason begins, his voice low. "I've been wondering, what happens after all of this is over? After we take down Sebastian and his empire, what do you want for yourself?" She looks up at him, her heart hammering in her chest. She's not sure if it's the thrill of the revenge or the intimacy of the moment that is making her pulse race, but she knows that the path she's on will inevitably lead to more than just the destruction of her ex-husband. "I'll have what's mine," Alina says, her voice firm, "and nothing will stand in my way." Jason's eyes flicker with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, darker. "You always get what you want, don't you?" Alina doesn't answer, instead choosing to let the silence hang in the air between them. She knows that this alliance, however fragile, could be the key to securing her future. But she also knows that it could lead to something more dangerous, something that could disrupt everything she's worked for. As she turns away, a flicker of uncertainty stirs in her chest. In her pursuit of revenge, has she become something she never intended to be? Alina stands at the apex of her game. Everything she's worked for, every move she's made, every sacrifice she's endured, has brought her to this point. Sebastian's empire is crumbling, bit by bit, and her hands are firmly on the levers of its destruction. But as she surveys the battlefield, something else stirs within her, a realization that power, while intoxicating, also comes at a steep price. The penthouse she occupies feels empty tonight. She had come to this place for a sense of security, a place where she could escape the world she had carefully crafted, a sanctuary from the constant planning, plotting, and retribution. But tonight, the solitude feels suffocating. Her thoughts circle back to what her mother had said, about how, in seeking to destroy Sebastian, she may be losing herself. As the city lights flicker in the distance, a familiar face appears in her thoughts. Jason. She hadn't anticipated how his presence would affect her. There had been moments when their partnership felt like it could evolve into something more, but each time she allowed herself to entertain the thought, she quickly pushed it aside. She couldn't afford distractions, and yet, there was something undeniable in the way he had stood by her, unwavering even in the darkest hours of her plan. His loyalty was both comforting and unnerving. She can feel a pull toward him, but the questions loom large. Is it trust, or is it something more? It's this internal struggle that shakes Alina to her core as she faces the cost of her revenge. The phone rings. "Alina, you need to see this," Jason's voice crackles through the speaker. Alina doesn't ask questions. She grabs her coat and heads to the elevator, feeling the weight of the decision ahead. It's time to confront the monster Sebastian has become. Alina arrives at the secure location where Jason is waiting. His expression is serious, something she's rarely seen from him. He hands her a folder with a single sheet of paper, its contents damning and unexpected. "We've been keeping tabs on Sebastian's financial transactions," Jason begins, "and there's something you need to know." Alina scans the document in her hands, her heart sinking with every word she reads. Sebastian had been more involved in illegal dealings than she had ever realized. His empire was built not just on betrayal, but on blood money, an entire network of criminal activity that had been covered up by his charm and influence. "We need to act fast," Jason adds. "If we don't move now, this could be the catalyst that brings his empire down for good. But it also means everyone associated with him is at risk, yourself included." Alina's eyes narrow. She hadn't anticipated this. This was beyond personal betrayal. This was a world of corruption so deep that it was tied to the very fabric of the city. And now she had to decide whether to expose it all and risk being buried beneath the weight of it. "Do you think this is the right move?" Alina asks, her voice calm but laced with uncertainty. Jason doesn't hesitate. "You've worked hard for this moment. You've fought to get to this point. You can take him down, completely." Alina takes a deep breath. This was more than just revenge now. It was about power, control, and making sure that Sebastian would never hurt anyone again. She nods, the decision final. "Then let's finish this." Alina's plan moves into full gear. Her lawyers, her business partners, her most trusted allies, all are set in motion. What had once been a carefully constructed web of corporate maneuvering is now a full-fledged war. The financial markets react swiftly to the revelations of Sebastian's illegal dealings, sending his stocks plummeting. Banks start freezing his accounts, and rival companies circle, eager to take over what remains of his empire. But even as her success seems assured, Alina feels the weight of the decision she's made. There's no turning back from this. She's burned bridges, shattered relationships, and dismantled everything Sebastian once held dear. And yet, the feeling of victory is hollow. The night after the first wave of her plan goes into motion, Alina finds herself alone in her office again. The city below her is bathed in the pale glow of streetlights, a silent witness to the chaos she's unleashed. Jason calls her, updating her on the progress. "It's happening, Alina," he says. "It's all falling apart for him." Alina leans back in her chair, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her glass. "And for me? What happens after all this?" Jason is quiet for a moment. You get everything you've wanted, you take back what was always yours. But even as he says the words, Alina can feel the truth settle in. What was always hers, or what was never truly hers to begin with. Sebastian had taken everything from her once, but in her pursuit of vengeance, Alina had taken something from herself as well, her peace, her sense of self-worth, the very thing that had kept her grounded. She's left wondering, after all the destruction, after the dust settles, who will Alina be? The woman who took back her power? Or the woman who lost herself in the fire? Alina's empire begins to rise in the aftermath. With Sebastian's downfall, she takes control of the company they had once built together. She watches as he is pushed out, every part of his legacy stripped away, piece by piece. The high society that once adored him now turns its back, flocking to the new face of the industry. Alina, the woman who had been scorned and betrayed but had risen from the ashes like a phoenix. But as she stands at the pinnacle of her success, she faces a truth she cannot escape. There is no victory without sacrifice. She's lost more than she's gained. The emptiness that began with Sebastian's betrayal has expanded to consume everything she once thought was important. Her relationship with Jason begins to deepen, but there is a tension that lingers. What does it mean for them to be more than partners in revenge? What happens if their alliance becomes something more? Can they truly trust each other, or is this yet another manipulation in a game they both understand too well? Alina stands in the boardroom, surrounded by those who were once her enemies, now her allies. They celebrate her triumph, but all Alina can think about is the cost. She's done what she set out to do. But what is left for her now? Jason's voice breaks through her thoughts. He's beside her, his expression unreadable. "Alina," he says quietly, "what now?" She looks at him, really looks at him for the first time. There's something in his eyes that speaks to her, something that goes beyond their partnership, beyond the game they've been playing. There's a softness there, a tenderness that wasn't there before. Alina feels the shift in herself. For the first time, she isn't thinking of the game, of the empire, of revenge. She's thinking of what happens when the dust settles, and the world has forgotten the price she paid. Can they truly trust each other, Or is this yet another manipulation in a game they both understand too well? Alina stands in the boardroom, surrounded by those who were once her enemies, now her allies. They celebrate her triumph, but all Alina can think about is the cost. She's done what she set out to do. But what is left for her now? Jason's voice breaks through her thoughts. He's beside her, his expression unreadable. "Alina," he says quietly, "what now?" She looks at him, really looks at him for the first time. There's something in his eyes that speaks to her, something that goes beyond their partnership, beyond the game they've been playing. There's a softness there, a tenderness that wasn't there before. Alina feels the shift in herself. For the first time, she isn't thinking of the game, of the empire, of revenge. She's thinking of what happens when the dust settles, and the world has forgotten the price she paid. Alina stands alone in the vast glass-walled penthouse that once belonged to her and Sebastian. The floor-to-ceiling windows frame a breathtaking view of the city that never sleeps. She's reached the pinnacle of her plans, her vengeance fulfilled. The empire is hers, and the public's eyes are now fixated on her. The applause she receives is deafening, but inside, there is nothing but silence. The empire she's built is gleaming, but it's been built on the ashes of so many things she loved, lost, and destroyed. The truth she's been hiding from herself starts to crystallize. What did she truly gain? The satisfaction of watching Sebastian fall? The power to control the empire? Or was it something deeper, something more personal? Alina's fingers graze the glass as she watches the city below. The weight of her success finally settles in her chest, heavy and cold. For the first time since her rebirth, she wonders if she is happy. She wonders if happiness is even possible anymore. The cost of what she's done is immeasurable. There are no more high society events for her to attend with pride, no more trophies to show off for her conquest. She's back in her mind, back to the days before all this, back to when everything was simple, when Sebastian's love felt like a shield, and she trusted him with all her heart. She remembers the days when they dreamed together, built together. She remembers how his hands felt in hers as they stood on the balcony of their home, watching the world pass by below them, back when they were invincible. But it was all a lie, wasn't it? He had shattered that illusion when he chose her best friend over her. A single tear escapes Alina's eye, but she quickly wipes it away. She's done with tears. She's done with regret. She can't afford to look back anymore. Jason's presence disrupts her thoughts. He's standing in the doorway, watching her with a careful, unreadable expression. Alina had grown used to his quiet strength, but tonight, there is something different in his demeanor. "Alina," he says softly, stepping closer. "I need to talk to you." She turns to face him, feeling the weight of his words even before they're spoken. "What is it, Jason?" she asks, her voice even but betraying a hint of uncertainty. She's been surrounded by chaos for so long, now she's not sure if she's ready to hear what he has to say. Jason hesitates, taking a breath. "I never wanted this to happen. The plan, the destruction. It was all meant to bring Sebastian down, but I didn't anticipate it would lead to this. We've crossed lines we can never uncross." Alina's heart races. "What are you saying?" Jason walks toward her, closing the space between them. "I've been working with you, Alina, because I believed in your vision. But now, I see what it's cost you, what it's cost both of us." He pauses, looking at her with a mixture of concern and something deeper, something that neither of them had been willing to acknowledge before. Alina stands still, her emotions swirling. She had always trusted Jason, and in some ways he had been her anchor in the chaos. She never thought she'd hear him say these words. Was he saying what she thought he was? "What do you want, Jason?" she asks quietly, almost afraid to hear the answer. Jason takes her hand, his touch warm and firm. "I want us to stop. Stop pretending that everything is fine. Stop pretending that we're not just two people lost in a war we created. I know you wanted revenge, but now, I think it's time we think about what's next." Alina feels the floodgates opening, the torrent of emotions she had kept locked away coming rushing forward. But she can't let them overwhelm her. She's been too strong for too long. "And what's next?" she asks, her voice breaking slightly. Jason looks at her, his gaze unwavering. "What if we build something new? Together?" The night stretches on, and Alina is left to wrestle with the weight of Jason's words. Her mind races, replaying every decision she's made, every move she's executed in her long game of vengeance. And now, at the precipice of it all, Jason asks her to turn away from it. Everything she's fought for, everything she's sacrificed. Could she really do that? Could she walk away from the empire, from the power, from the revenge? As the moonlight bathes the penthouse in a cold, silvery glow, Alina contemplates what she truly wants. She'd fought so hard to rebuild herself after Sebastian's betrayal. She had turned her pain into fuel for her success, using it to tear down everything he had built. But what now? She looks at Jason. He's not just a partner in this war anymore, he's something more. He's the one person who has seen her broken, seen her at her lowest, and still believed in her. He's not asking for control, not asking for dominance. He's offering something she's never considered before, peace. Alina takes a deep breath, the decision weighing heavily on her chest. I've lost so much, Jason. I've become someone I don't recognize, but I still have the chance to choose. And I choose us. Jason's eyes soften, and in that moment Alina realizes just how far they've come. From allies in destruction to something more. They've both paid the price for their ambition, but now they're standing at a crossroads. And this time, Alina isn't afraid to walk away from it all. In the days that follow, the world watches as Alina makes her move. She publicly announces her plans to dismantle the empire she had fought so hard to build. The stock market reacts in a frenzy, and corporate giants scramble to secure their interests. Her decision sends shockwaves through the business world. Alina, the woman who had risen from the ashes of betrayal, is choosing to walk away from it all. Sebastian, now a shadow of the powerful man he once was, watches helplessly as Alina strips him of everything he had taken from her. But as she lets go of the empire, she gains something infinitely more valuable, peace. She and Jason make a public declaration, one that shocks the world. They are not just business partners anymore. They are building something new, together. The final pages of Alina's story are written in a quiet office overlooking the city. There are no more betrayals, no more power struggles, no more wars to be fought. Instead, there is just Alina and Jason, building a future, brick by brick. As she gazes out at the world below, she reflects on the journey that brought her here, the betrayal, the rise to power, the heartbreak, and ultimately, the decision to leave it all behind. And though she knows she will never forget the past, Alina has finally found something more precious than revenge: peace. The final scene is simple, but profound. Alina and Jason standing side by side, looking toward the future they will build together. Alina sits by the window in her new office, gazing out at the horizon. The city, bathed in the soft light of dusk, stretches out before her, silent, steady, and unchanging. But inside, she feels different. She is no longer the woman who woke up each morning fueled by the need for revenge. She's no longer the person who measured her worth by her empire, by the power she held, or by how much she could take from the people who wronged her. Alina had once believed that vengeance was the answer, that breaking Sebastian, that watching him squirm in his failure, would somehow fill the emptiness inside her. She had believed that destroying everything he built would somehow make her whole. But as she stares out the window, she understands now that the real victory was not in the destruction, but in the transformation. She was reborn. Yes, but reborn in a way she hadn't anticipated. I thought I wanted to see him beg for forgiveness, see him beg for mercy, and that would be enough. But now I realize I never needed that. What I needed was to forgive myself first, to free myself from the prison I'd built around my heart, a prison of rage and resentment. What I wanted was peace. True peace. The final confrontation with Sebastian is brief, but it carries the weight of years of tension. They meet in a neutral location, no grand gestures, no dramatic speeches. It's just them, and as they sit across from each other, the distance between them is palpable. Sebastian, once so confident and self-assured, now seems small in comparison to the woman who once stood at his side. Alina can see the cracks in the facade, the unraveling of the empire he once thought he controlled. Alina doesn't speak much, there's nothing left to say. Instead, she calmly outlines the end of his reign, the last steps in the process of stripping him of the empire he thought was his. She doesn't gloat, she doesn't revel in his downfall, she just lays out the facts with the quiet strength she's always had. Sebastian's reaction is exactly what Alina expects. He's angry, desperate, blaming everyone but himself for his situation. He accuses her of betrayal, of being cruel, of taking everything from him. But this time, Alina doesn't respond with fury. She simply stands up, a final look passing between them. You never loved me, Sebastian. You never saw me. And now, there's nothing left for us to fight over. I've moved on. And with that, Alina walks away. Not just from him, but from the past. There are no more words, no more struggles, no more shadows of who she used to be. She's finally free. In the final moments of the book, Alina and Jason stand together, gazing at their future. They've been through so much together: betrayals, heartbreaks, battles, and quiet moments of understanding. But now, they have a clean slate. Jason, always by her side but never pushing, finally asks her the one question he's been waiting for. Jason, what do we do now? Alina turns to him, a gentle smile curving her lips. She's at peace. She knows that their future isn't defined by the destruction of the past, but by the promise of a new beginning. A beginning where they work together, not out of spite or revenge, but out of mutual respect and shared vision. Now we build together, from the ground up. No more wars, no more games, just us, creating something worth having. And that's where we leave them. Alina and Jason, embarking on a future they've earned side by side. The empire that once defined her is no longer the symbol of her success. The real success lies in her ability to reinvent herself, to grow beyond the bitterness of the past, and to embrace the future with open arms.